If you use multiple FACILEX applications, it makes sense to have a big picture view of the data. On the left-hand side of the FACILEX portal, you can see the entire facility structure. This is useful for local managers who might ask the question, what's going on in my area? MOCs, incidents, risks, etc. This is also useful for folks with corporate roles since they can access all of the data for all the sites. For the individual, you would want an aggregated view of all tasks assigned to you across all the applications. That way, you don't have to visit each application individually. That's the idea of the links under My Responsibilities. If I click My Active Objects, I can see that I'm the owner of a variety of objects as indicated by their icons on the left. On the right, I have ready access to all the applications that are available to me. As a practical matter, our clients start with 1 or 2 applications and grow the risk-based process safety footprint over time. Right now, I'm going to the MOC application. With the recent release of API 754 3rd edition, there's renewed interest in process safety metrics. A lot of companies use Microsoft Power BI to visualize data. When I click on the Power BI link, I am taken to a live Power BI site showing MOC data. Selecting Area 1 filters all the charts on the page to show just Area 1 data. Moving the time slicer to 2018-2019 filters the data further. While not technically MOC data, I thought you might find the risk register metrics interesting. Especially this chart where the size of the bubbles corresponds to the number of risks that fall into the applicable probability consequences category. Okay, back at the participants portal, let's create a new permanent MOC. Here is the permanent MOC initiation form. Every form in FACILEX is configurable. That is, you can modify the form to suit your requirements without doing any programming and without relying on the availability of programming resources. While the forms are end-user configurable, we do provide training to permit you to make these changes safely and effectively. Given that the form is configurable, you can have as many fields as you wish, or as few as you wish. The fields labeled with asterisks are mandatory, based on OSHA regulations, so I'd be careful about removing those. Obviously, I can enter a title. I'm showing a 3-level hierarchy for identifying the plant, the area, and the unit. MOCs typically have a target date, and temporary MOCs could also display a change reversal date. Here is an optional field to identify whether this MOC is associated with the capital project and the estimated cost. You can specify the shutdown requirements. There's also a capability to do emergency MOCs, but that's a discussion for another day. Note that the work order number is optional since you may not have that information at the time you create a new MOC. The last 2 fields provide the opportunity to enter the technical basis of change, required fields from a regulatory perspective. Once the MOC is created, we are directed to the dashboard. Note that this MOC's risk level is undetermined. At the start of an MOC, a lot of companies like to do risk pre-screening. Here's a sample risk pre-screening form. As I make various selections, the risk level goes up and down. It also tells me what kind of hazard analysis is going to be suggested. There's also an override at the bottom, where you can request a more detailed hazard analysis, but not a less detailed one. Some people use a traditional probability consequences approach, which is fully supported by FACILEX, but that's a lot more clicking than the form that I just showed you. So you'll have to decide what level of detail is needed for risk pre-screening. We can see that the risk level is now medium. The next step in the MOC process is usually to save supporting documentation like preliminary red lines. Clicking the icon brings me to a folder structure that is unique to this specific MOC. I can save a document that I redlined, And I can verify it by simply clicking on its name or icon. Note that there's only one red line on this sheet. Later, you might decide to modify the red line some more. You can drag the modified red line into the folder and take a look at it. Having saved the red lines, we'll complete the task and see that the MOC has been promoted to the scoping state. We are going to scope the MOC by exercising the applicable checklists. We have a choice of which checklists to use. Most client MOC systems have 1 or 2 dozen checklists, but you'll get the idea looking at my samples here. The general checklist is selected and enforced. In other words, everybody has to complete this checklist. Documents to be updated is selected, but not enforced. I'm also going to select cybersecurity. So here's the general checklist. We're going to answer yes to the RP and IDs to be changed question. There are different perspectives on how to select the PHA methodology. You could A, allow the MOC owner to propose the PHA methodology as shown here, or B, you can give the MOC owner no say in the matter and have it automatically determined by the risk level coming out of pre-screening, or C, you can do nothing here and let the PHA team choose what they want to do. There are pros and cons to each of these approaches, which we can discuss another day. I'm going to say yes to the is operator training required? If I answer yes to the question, will any kind of inspection be needed, then there are additional questions which drop down regarding what kind of inspection we want. I'm going to leave them all as no for now. However, we will need multiple PSSRs, so I'll pick that right now. In the Documents to be Updated section, I'm picking yes to the P&IDs question. Here are the cybersecurity questions adapted from the CCPS book. I'll leave these as no for now. At some point, we have to identify which person is going to fulfill which role on the MOC. For example, the owner is an enforced role. The asset team is suggested to be everyone, but we may want to restrict this to just, say, Area 1 operations. Although in the real world, approvers are usually predefined, I'm using this one as an example where the user can specify who fulfills which role. Clicking Create Action Items. Now the scoping exercise created a number of action items that we can see here. This is the overall MOC process from start to finish. Additional action items can be added, but we'll get to that. After scoping out the change, the MOC is sent to the approvers to validate the scoping. In other words, is our plan for the MOC acceptable? This is not the same as committing the funds, because that comes later once the hazard analysis is done. If you were an approver, what would you want to see? Well, in a word, everything. To get there, you can look at a printable report rendition of this MOC. When the approver approves the scoping of this MOC, she leaves a comment. This looks good. Be sure to follow RAGAGEPT for the material properties on the valve. Afterwards, there's a task to redline the piping and instrumentation drawings. You can respond by saying this is not applicable with the comment, I provided this drawing at the start of the MOC. At this point, the MOC has been promoted to the impact analysis state. I'm going to do the absolute simplest what if imaginable, noting that more sophisticated tools are available. Note that the what if template is fully integrated with FACILEX, inasmuch as the title, MOC number, and location are automatically populated into this template. We can fill it in with representative data, and then close the file. It's automatically saved in FACILEX. If there were follow-up items, they could have been created using the Create Action tool. But in the absence of PHA follow-ups, the MOC is promoted to the approval state. The MOC approvers can review the data much like I suggested before. They now have a chance of approving using the green button and rejecting using the red button. Rejecting the MOC always requires a comment or reason why the MOC was rejected. It then goes back to the owner to decide on remedial actions. At this point, the MOC owner is responsible for monitoring the progress of the change in the facility. When complete, they sign off that the implementation is done. Then we have to start training folks on the change. Often this involves printing off the red lines and a sign-off sheet and posting them in the control room or maintenance shop. Here's a sample, again with the heading information coming from FACILEX. We then move on to the PSSR. You may recall that we specified multiple PSSRs when we scoped out the change. To that end, FACILEX has provided a mechanism to create PSSRs as seen here. Every time an action item becomes active, it generates a task to each person who is assigned to work on that particular action item. The tasks generate emails which look like this. The emails have descriptive information about the MOC, the PSSR, and the task at hand. There are links at the bottom which allow you to go to the dashboard, complete the task, and, if permitted, even approve the task. I'm going to demonstrate this using my iPad tablet. Note that the task is called Select what kind of PSSR you wish to do. This is what it looks like in email, and this is what it looks like on my iPad. I'll click the tool on Select what kind of PSSR you wish to do. And I see a choice. If I choose Paper Form, then the application would provide the current PSSR form. I would print it, do the PSSR in the facility, scan it, and save it in FACILEX. Then I would create the PSSR punch list items manually in the system. If I choose tablet computer, then all of those tasks are automated. The rest of the action items are processed in a similar way, through to closeout. In fact, the same lifecycle-based approach is used for the other PSM-related business processes. Here's the lifecycle for detailed incident investigation. Here's the lifecycle for an ad hoc action item. Here's the lifecycle for a risk register with its remediation activities. So far, we've seen a lot of capabilities. And we've just scratched the surface. I frequently tell people, if you can put it into words, it can be configured in FACILEX. So I can say with full confidence that your requirements will be satisfied.